Okay, so I'm just going to do a really quick review of some trail running shoes. I've just got the new Brooks Cascadia 14s. You can see they've just come out of the box. No mud, nothing. They're brand new. For many years, I've been running in the Brooks Cascadia range. It's a nice medium drop trail shoe. It's fairly traditional, I suppose. And they do other models, Caldera, Pure Grit, and they're a much lower drop. I guess probably more modern design, but a lot of folk prefer a slightly higher drop on the shoe, and these fit the bill perfectly. You can see these old pair of Cascadia 12s are pretty worn in now, but actually just looking at them, I'd say they look pretty similar overall. One thing I like about the Brooks shoes is that between different versions, they're not changing the actual fundamental shape of the shoe or the sole too much. So you can fairly safely keep kind of trading up when you wear a pair out and know pretty much what you're getting. And the kind of similar features that kind of you can see on the design of the sole there. So I'm looking forward to these. I'm hoping for great things. I can just see a few improvements that they've pushed out on this one. It's got the nice little pocket on there for the laces to tuck in, and they've gone with these kind of low profile lace design. And if anything, this is it's more similar to the previous edition. I can't remember if it was the 10 or 11, but that was one of my favourite shoes for a while. And they've gone back a bit towards that design, which I'm really pleased about. And the colour too is similar to that. These are pretty garish, but there was kind of a fairly limited choice of these shoes around. But they've been really great on all kinds of conditions, from dry trails to loose gravel, even in a bit of the muddy stuff. They're not too bad either. Just a comparison, I've been using the Asics Gel Fujitrabuco 6s for a while, just to kind of try something different out, and I'll give you kind of a comparison to those as well. Main thing about this shoe is it's a bit narrower, and I would say it's kind of a bit of a faster shoe, at least it feels that way, and it's a bit of a lighter shoe as well. But one thing you really notice is it's got a much kind of lower volume in the toe and in the shoe generally. These Brooks shoes are great. They've got kind of a nice bit of space in the toe box. It's just when your foot gets hot, it's really, really good. It just kind of allows you to let your foot breathe, and you don't get too much kind of damage on the front of your feet, toes as you're descending kind of steep tracks and things, which is really good. I've really enjoyed this shoe, but for long runs, I find the toe box is a little bit restricted for me. I've got quite wide feet. One thing that's really great about Brooks shoes as well is if you've got wide feet, they actually do an even wider model than this. So they do a wide fitting model as well. This is the standard, what they call, I suppose, the narrow fit. And even for me with a wide foot, it's hopefully going to be pretty good. And just looking at it against the old one, it looks pretty similar. It's hard to tell. I might say, if anything, looks a bit narrower. But I had a chat with the guys at Brooks, and they assured me that this was a kind of pretty similar fit, and if anything had a bit more space in than the 12, they said. So they said I'd have no worries at all. I should just say I'm in no way linked to Brooks running. I buy these shoes with my own money, all of them. I'm not affiliated with any brands, so I'll just give you my honest opinion. We'll go for a run in these, see what they're like. I'll give you a kind of comparison to the old ones. I'll let you know how I think they compare with the Asics, which is another really nice shoe, general all-rounder, and see how we get on.
You immediately notice when you put the shoe on, it's an improvement over the old version. The little tongue and the gravel protection on the new shoe is better than the old one. And also just around the ankle, I found the old ones have tended to fray. All of the Cascadias I've ever worn fray a little bit on the ankle, and I think they've just dropped the inside of the heel that's here, and I think they've reduced the padding a little bit, which hopefully means it might be less at risk of catching and kind of wearing out. I did feel with the Cascadia 12s, the build quality and the features had taken a step backwards somewhat from previous versions, where they really were getting better and better each edition. I'm pleased to say with the Brooks Cascadia 14, they've gone back in the right direction. It looks like the build quality and the features on the shoe are an improvement in pretty much every department. It now feels like a real premium product. I tend to run on the footpath from my house down to the trails and run along the rivers and stuff like that. And so it's really important to me to have a shoe that's nice on the road and also nice on the trail. And the great thing about the Cascadia range is it works really well on the road as well as on the trail. And if you compare it to the Asics shoe, that one's much more comfortable just on the trail, and it's a little bit less cushioned on the road, a little bit less comfortable. So for me, if I'm going out on a mixture of trails, the Brooks shoe is always the better one. Just immediate reactions as I'm running down the trail is the shoe feels very much like the old one. What's noticeable about the Brooks Cascadia over the Asics is the cushioning, and it's really comfortable over uneven ground and rocks and things like that, and it just takes a lot of the punishment out of your feet, I suppose, by just kind of absorbing all of these little unevennesses in the surface. And it's one of the things you'll notice most, I think, about the Brooks compared with perhaps some other trail running shoes. It has a decent amount of cushioning and support around the foot. Where I find this makes a difference is on longer runs. And if I'm going out on a short run, a fast run maybe, and just on trails, particularly hilly trails, technical stuff, that might be where the Asics comes into its own. But if I'm doing longer, flatter sections, which I tend to do around my home, the Brooks has it for me, particularly when the paths are dry. It's good from that point of view of having cushioning, and it gives you a really comfortable run. One thing that's immediately noticeable is how good the cushioning is on the new shoe. Maybe it's just because the old one has worn out a bit, but it's fantastic on the Brooks Cascadia 14. When the surface starts to get a bit uneven, the Brooks really comes into its own, particularly when your feet are tired. The cushioning and the sole in general seems to sort of keep your feet going in a straight line. And even when your ankles maybe are tired and you're rocking around a little bit more, the support will help keep you going for many miles. On my first tryout, I only ran 10k the other day, but it was quite a warm day. And what you immediately notice is that the new uppers are really breathable, and my feet kept cool throughout the run. And as my feet start to warm up and the toes start to expand, you really appreciate that large box at the front of the shoe, which gives your toes and your feet plenty of room just to breathe and not get too hot. And there's certainly no risk for me of any hot spots in these shoes. In terms of the fit of the shoe, Brooks recommend you go half a size up from your normal shoe size. And for me, I normally wear a 43 shoe, and that means I buy a 44 in Brooks. And over many years, I've always found their fit guide to be spot on. One of the great things about Brooks shoes is they also do a wide fitting. And I actually have a wide foot, but I've always run in the standard narrow shoe. And I find there's plenty of room in there. I'm not sure whether or not anybody would benefit from the wide shoe or not. Certainly worth giving it a go if you do think you've got particularly wide feet. But what I can say for this review is that the standard Brooks fitting has plenty of room, and it's certainly noticeable when you compare it with a shoe like the Asics, which has a more pointed, narrow toe in the shoebox. And I find over a long run, that can just give you a little bit of risk of rubbing just on your smaller toes on the outside, which is why I prefer the Brooks shoe for longer trail runs. And I'm talking about 20 to 40 kilometer type things, but it'll tend to be my go-to shoe every day of the week. If you're not sure which of the Brooks shoes to go for, one of the things I would recommend is using their shoe selector, which is something you can see on their website. It's a great tool that helps you analyze your stride and your preferences in a shoe. One word of caution is I went through that shoe selector and it recommended for me the Caldera shoe because I put down a preference for more bounce than cushioning. Now, I hadn't really thought about it at the time, but when you go into the detailed specifications of the two shoes, the Caldera versus the Cascadia, you'll notice that the drop is much lower on the Caldera and it's similar with the Pure Grit. So I would recommend, if you're a runner who prefers a higher drop shoe, probably ignore the guidance on cushioning versus bounce and stick with the Cascadia. If you're not really sure about drop, one of the things that I find helps make the decision around which shoe I go out running in is the type of terrain. On longer, flatter runs, I find that the extra height of the Cascadia will give me a more comfortable run and I'll have less stiffness in my legs and my Achilles after the run. If I'm running on something more technical up and down, I find it makes less difference, and that might be where I reach for a shoe like the Asics, or maybe something like my Innovates, which have got a low drop on as well. And I find the extra kind of grip in the sense of being low to the ground is slightly better on more technical surfaces. But for me, on flatter runs, which I tend to do day to day, I appreciate that extra height. So for me, in summary, the Brooks Cascadia is a fantastic shoe. It's one of the best on the market, I reckon, as an all-rounder. It enables you to go from the tarmac to the trail with ease. It's pretty good at handling technical stuff, and it's not too bad in the mud either. Sure, when it gets to the depths of winter and it's really muddy, I'll probably reach for something like my Innovates, but for 90% of my running year-round, the Brooks Cascadia has to be one of the best trail running shoes that you can buy, and the Brooks Cascadia 14 seems to be improved in pretty much every department whilst keeping the same dependable fit and great cushioning that Brooks are famous for. I hope you found this trail running shoe guide useful. Please leave me some comments if you want to ask me any questions, and I'd love you to subscribe to the channel too.